Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Yasmina Greco. I'm with O'Reilly Media, and I will be your host for today's webcast. Folks, as we get our event started today, I'd like to say a couple words about our sponsor today, Citrix, and let you all know that Netscaler, the market-leading Application Delivery Controller, ADC, from Citrix, is designed to speed up development, testing, deployment, and maintenance of web applications. This webinar today will give an overview of what an ADC is and how the choice of ADC can affect the running and development of web applications. In the age of mobility and the trend toward agile application development, working with the right ADC can make or break an application. Thank you again, Citrix. Today we have Graham Melville with us, and he's going to talk to you about cloud networking, what it means for app development. Graham has over 25 years in the networking and mobility space. He has a diverse sales, marketing, technical, and business background in manufacturing, including Symbol, Motorola, Nokia, and Maroon Networks. In the partner channel, he was a general manager of a reseller, and in the area of distribution, he directed a region. Graham holds patents in the WLAN space and has been a voting member of the IEEE 802.11 security group. Folks, we're very excited to have Graham with us today to present this webcast for you all. Okay, as we get things even started further, I'd like to go over just a little housekeeping to help you get the most out of today's webcast. First, you'll want to open your group chat widget if you haven't already done so. This is where we can interact with each other during the event and where you can submit your questions for Graham. We find that our audience usually has a lot of good knowledge to share, so we encourage you all to chat freely during the event. However, if you have questions for Graham, please preface them with a capital letter Q so we know that they're for him and we can make sure we see it for Q&A. You can also open, move, and resize any of the other widgets. If you'd like to tweet from the Twitter widget today, you might need to give it permission to access your account. The Twitter widget will automatically append the event's hashtag to your tweet so you don't have to. And today our hashtag is VelocityConf, all one word. If you should have any trouble during the event, please take a look at your help widget. If you continue to have trouble, just post it in the group chat and one of our staff will help you right away. For choppy audio or stalled visuals, please try refreshing your window. And remember, the best thing you can do for a good audio stream is close any apps that could interfere. People always ask, so we'd like you to know we are recording today's webcast, and we will have the archive ready usually within 48 hours. And folks, at this time, it is my pleasure to turn the program over to Graham for his presentation. Hello, Graham.
Hi, thanks. Thanks very much for the introduction. So let's take a quick look at the agenda and what we're going to be going through. So we've done the introductions. And where we're going to be going from there is just a little bit on where Citrix are positioned in the market and why we're talking about this subject, and some of the market trends that are driving more web development and changes that are going on there. Secondly, we'll cover the basics of what an application delivery controller is before we dive down deeper as the third item there into more detail on how this affects web development through the different cycles, through development, through test, through launch, and through the ongoing life cycle, as well as touching just a little bit on the protection of web applications as well. So starting at the highest level, if we look at the market as a whole, there's clearly a big shift in the way that people are working, and you've probably heard and seen many people talking about, the shift in culture that's happening, and a world where people can work and play from anywhere. And that is delivered through things such as bring your own device, BYOD, work shifting, the ability to split your shift up among the day between your personal stuff and your work stuff. And also along with BYOD and mobility comes a high number of micro apps that are coming down into the enterprise, primarily driven through the proliferation of apps that you get in your private world on your smartphones. And those app stores themselves are starting to come into the enterprise. And, those of you that follow Citrix know that we have a deep investment there, and you can see, on our website and other things, all that we do there. But all those changes, this consumerization is forcing a change deeper down into the infrastructure. And that's putting a lot of pressure on IT resources as well. And there's something, this is something that Citrix saw coming many years ago when it bought Netscaler as a company. So our product, which I'll kind of primarily be talking about, our application delivery controller, is called Netscaler. And Netscaler was the company that Citrix bought some time back. And now Netscaler is, in fact, the fastest growing ADC on the market. And there was an interesting study that was done in 2013 on who you as the customers, if people in IT directors, CIOs, etc., who they saw as market leaders. And this is something that IT Brand Pulse does across a number of categories, from servers to virtualization down into the network infrastructure and Ethernet. And one of those categories was application delivery controllers. And it's a pretty simple survey. It's who do you perceive as the market leader, the price leader, the performance leader, the reliability leader, service and support leader, and innovation leader. And this year in 2013 was the first year that Citrix won all 6 categories. So we're now perceived by the market as the leader in this application delivery space. And so, that's something that's increased over the years. And it wasn't just a small win that we had. As you can see, the top position that we have here in a couple of the categories that I've put up in terms of innovation and service and support, show that we do, in fact, have a good leadership here. And in fact, the market numbers also show that in terms of the Gartner and what their numbers show and what they say. So Gartner statistics show that Citrix Netscaler, a recognized ADC market leader, has exhibited consistent growth every quarter over the last year. And in fact, what that chart and statement from Gartner doesn't actually show you is, in fact, we were the only company that grew every quarter last year. So this is an important area of the market for us. It's something that we're very focused on. And so want to explain to you now a little bit on what the basics of an application delivery controller does, in case there are those of you that are new to this market. And then we'll dive down a little bit deeper into, some of the functions. So first of all, at the highest level, as the name kind of states, an ADC is about applications. It sits in the network, typically in a data center. And it's in the path. It's connecting any user on any device in any location back into the data center resources and enabling all the applications and data that's flowing through. And so before we get down into the value that Netscaler gives, I want to ask you a question out there to see, partly what kind of an audience we have and where I can fast forward a little bit and where I need to slow down. And so the question is, if you can kind of go to your poll, how familiar are you with ADCs? And if this is new to you, then obviously you'll put not at all. But how familiar are you with ADCs? Is this something that you work with every day? Something that you work with fairly regularly, or is this new to you? So if you click on your polls tab, I believe it is, you'll be able to take this poll. And we'll just give a quick pause here so you can go and do that. Okay, that's great. So it looks like, in fact, half of our audience, exactly half of our audience, are not really sure what an application delivery controller is. So we will spend a little bit of time then going through what the application delivery controller is. So let's get back to the presentation. So one of the main focuses of an application delivery controller is that it optimizes web applications. So what it can do for web applications is it can eliminate downtime. It can actually increase the performance, and it depends on the type of web application and quite a few things, whether it's 5 times, 10 times, 15 times. But it can increase the performance and availability of applications. It can also block attacks that come through to web applications. So some of you might have heard of something called web application firewalls. This is very different to network firewalls. And it can block attacks on websites. And it can also improve the server utilization. So it can actually, again, make your web application run a lot faster, be it in the cloud or be it in your local data center. So how does it do it? Well, we can break kind of down the functions that an application delivery controller does into a few different buckets. So starting with availability, and then performance, and then offload, and lastly security. So in terms of availability, it does this through things like load balancing, and in terms of performance, things like caching and offload. It takes a lot of functions that servers don't do particularly well and moves it onto the application delivery controller. And particularly if you're trying to secure the transactions for your application, then the application delivery controller actually, if you're buying an appliance, has specialist hardware within there that takes the security functions and runs them incredibly quickly. And so there's a lot of things that it does. So if we dwell a little bit on availability for some time, the reason or the way that it gives a higher availability is delivered in a number of ways. One is something called load balancing. And for those of you that have been following this space for a while will realize that actually what is now application delivery controllers grew out of the load balancing market. And so at the base level, all application delivery controllers provide this load balancing. And then the application delivery controllers like Netscaler also provide what's called L7 switching or content switching. And this is something that enables you to run your servers more efficiently by it sending the same kind of content requests to the same servers over and over again. And then it also provides global server load balancing. So load balancing enables you to have, one address, www.graham.com, everything comes to there, but there could be a whole farm of servers behind that are servicing that, and the application delivery controller, load balances between them. But what happens if a whole data center goes down, or there's, some other problem in the wider network? And that's where global server load balancing comes in, and that's disaster recovery. And that enables, seamless switching to a secondary or backup data center, and that could be in a different country or just down the street. It can work in different ways. Then it also protects against DDoS attacks. Now, I'm sure you all heard on the news about denial of service attacks and things that, can bring down sites. And by using your application delivery controller and turning on that denial of service attack feature, it'll stop those attacks getting through and bringing down your application. And it's interesting that if you read through both the Verizon security reports and also a report that Gartner put out on the use of application delivery controllers in front of web applications, it's interesting that a lot of people don't turn on these advanced features. They're still using basic load balancing. And so their applications get brought down, not because they don't have the right infrastructure in place, but because they just don't have a networking team that understands how to protect their applications. So if you're actually in the application development side of your business, some of the information we're giving you here is a good way for you to educate your network team to make sure that they have all the features and functions turned on that will actually protect your applications and make them more successful out there in the market. And then the last one on availability is the application firewall. The web application firewall is also a critical part of it. It stops all number of types of attacks that come through directly to your applications and even to the back-end SQL servers that maybe your applications are using. And again, that's something that needs to be turned on and used. So what about the end user? How does it work for the end user? Well, it also improves the user experience because of the way that it optimizes and makes more efficient use of the network connections and the connections through to servers. The user experience can be improved and can be made a lot faster. And the same thing with the way that the caching works. So it's important when choosing an application delivery controller to make sure you choose one that doesn't just support static content in its cache, but is also dynamic and intelligent in the way that it pulls things through. Because if you take, for example, if maybe you're running a games website that has a series of games, then obviously the ones that are downloaded most may change over time. And so you don't want to be continually going back in and deciding, which ones to put in the cache. You want a system that does that for you automatically. And the same if you're running an e-commerce website that's selling particular things. You want it to always have in the cache the hot selling items and the ones that sell most. And if you're running an educational website, different things happen through different periods of the student's year, and so there'll be areas of the website that are more interesting in some times than others, and so you need something that dynamically does that. And data compression is another thing that can make a difference. I used to run a little website, in fact it's still up there, a while back, and when I came to Citrix and they showed a test on compression and the difference it made, I kind of put my website in not expecting it to make much difference, and it said it would actually improve my website's performance by 7 times. So just something simple like turning that on can make a big difference. So there are lots of things that are delivered through the application delivery controller that will make your web applications look a lot better to the end user, give them a better experience. So it's important to understand them and educate the network team to make sure they're turned on. The other thing that it does that kind of affects a number of things is it reduces the load on servers. And so particularly, if you're beginning to hit the limits on servers or you're being given a limited amount of processing space within a virtual server environment, being able to offload functions, particularly, as I've already said, the security, the SSL offload is something that considerably improves performance. And there's also things that are done such as multiplexing the connections and buffering, and again the caching comes in there that reduces a significant load on the servers. So that kind of describes at a high level what application delivery controllers do overall. Now what I want to do is look a little bit further down as to how the choice of an application delivery controller can affect web development. Now on this next slide, before you all think, oh my goodness, we've only got less than 40 minutes left and he's going to go through all this. This is just an eye candy chart. So this is just to give you an idea of all the kind of different things that Netscaler can do and the different areas of applications that it can affect. But what I want to do is just pick a few of the things on this list and hone down into a few features so you can understand the difference that it can make and how it can make micro apps and web apps and the new applications that are being delivered, particularly in the cloud, be a lot more effective. So if we take a look at these 4, I want to dive into a little bit more detail so you can appreciate what's possible. So we'll look at rewrite, which is a way of rewriting any part of an HTTP header or body. We'll look at Responder, which changes the way responses coming back from the servers can be sent, and we'll go into that. And touching on HTTP callouts and the policy infrastructure that kind of ties in with that and helps you with delivering the right things in the right way. So if we start with rewrite as an example, so rewrite, as I already say, it's a way of rewriting and changing HTTP or HTTPS for that matter, any part of it, the body or the header. And so this enables you to have automatically inserted things such as client IP, because one of the things that the application delivery controller does is it acts as a full proxy, and so it's able to hide IP addresses in a way that adds a lot of security. Well, that's all very well, but what if you actually want to know what the IP address of the client is? So there's a number of different ways you can do that, and one is to add them in as it comes through this rewrite. And there are other things you might want to do and add specific information about, such as whether they're using an SSL connection, and you might want to have information out of that SSL connection. You may be referencing third-party websites, and maybe the third-party website changed its name, and you don't want to go back through the process of changing your application if there's significant test cycles that the production team would expect you to go through to republish it for something so simple as a change of a URL. So you can actually use rewrite on the application delivery controller to rewrite the URL whenever it sees it as it leaves your web application before it goes out to the client. And you can also do things such as tag secure and non-secure connections. So you might want to treat connections coming in that are secure on an SSL connection different to non-secure connections. And so you can do things like that. And you can also insert analytic scripts there as well, so to give you a lot more information on what's going on going forward. So this allows you to rewrite the body or the header of requests that are coming in from the client or going back from the server. Now, the next one I want to talk about is kind of confusing because it sounds a little bit similar, and it's called Responder. But Responder works slightly differently, and it also works for SQL as well. And what it does is it allows a response to be given from the appliance without the application having to be part of that or do any work. So it can do things that maybe the server can't do, or maybe it's just better to do at this point. So for example, it can prevent too many logins. So when you see sites where you've got multiple logins, and then maybe it's sending you off somewhere else after you've done so many and asking you to type in some fuzzy word which you can barely read, and they kind of expect you to be able to read but a computer not to read. Those kind of things, it can prevent those kind of get floods by sending off to a third-party service such as Capture. Some of the more common things that it's always kind of used for is to stop error pages coming up. And so when someone goes to a wrong page, rather than you getting your standard 404 error, what it can do is you can input a page. And so, for example, if you go to somewhere like Amazon.com and put in a false page, you'll get a nice screen back that says, oops, I think we've got a mistake there. How can we help you? Do you want to go to the home page, etc.? Or if you were to go to Apple iTunes and do the same thing, it will come back with a page and give you a whole list of different options of pages that maybe you meant to go to. And that's done out of an application delivery controller. And one of the other nice things you can do is if all the web servers are down behind, you can actually cascade down through those servers, and when there's nothing left, you send it to effectively a false server, and it actually sends back a message to the user. Rather than them getting nothing at all with website can't be found or anything, it can send back a message saying, oh, sorry, there seems to be a problem with the website at the moment. Do you want to try again or come back later? Those kind of things. So it just makes a much more nicer interactive experience for the end user, but also it can extract some of the information you might not want going back. So there's a lot of information that goes back, in the language that talks about maybe what kind of, particularly when there's an error, what server you're running on, what version it is, and, hackers will target particular versions of, for example, Apache. So if you were to remove that in the responses using Responder, or you could rewrite it and confuse them completely and talk about a non-existent thing. So there's lots of things that you can do with Responder. Then there's next one I want to talk about in a little bit more detail is called HTTP callout. Now this is a very interesting way of being able to do some pretty complicated stuff. And so what callout does, it's almost a way of calling a third-party service. And what it does is it takes requests that are coming in and it sends it off to a third-party server, and it can take back a Boolean response, numeric response, or text response. And you can then make a decision on that, maybe in fact using Responder or rewrite. And so you can do things such as filtering IP blacklists. And, there are some controls on the system itself. Obviously, there are access control lists. But sometimes you have very dynamic lists, particularly if you're trying to keep certain hackers out or certain, from certain countries out. That they have a way of hopping around their IP addresses a lot to try and get around these systems. And so there are third-party services that will monitor them. And so you can test each new connection coming in against maybe an IP blacklist. It also enables you to use edge-side includes. So if you're using that within your web content, it allows for edge-side includes, which allows, fetching and updating dynamic content from a third party. And also you can use it for other types of access and control. And you can actually use it to resend failed requests a number of times so that, they don't get a failure if it's at a particularly slow time. It just kind of keeps it open for a little bit longer before it gives a failure message. The nice thing about keeping, third-party lists within your own organization as well is if you're taking information, for example, you're developing a new website and you've taken a list of beta customers that you want to work with, and you don't want to bother the network team with having to reconfigure, the authentication for those and which server they go to. You could actually run on a separate server that beta list, and when you see those beta customers, you could send them to a separate server that had your beta version of your web application on it. There's some pretty clever stuff that you can do to to enhance your web development in that area. Now I'm just going to stop and take a quick look at Q&A because I see in the chat window that moderator is saying there's some interesting questions. Okay, so one is, what protects against the ADC being hacked and the rewrite process being hijacked? Okay, that's a good question. Application Delivery Controller is actually a very secure platform. So it starts with a base code, and in fact we have some webinars that explain how it's been developed. So we strip out all security vulnerabilities, and it's very specifically written for this process. So it's a very hardened box. It acts as the application firewall, so it's tested and authenticated as a firewall. So you end up with a very secure and hard box. So that was a good question. There's another question on, will software-defined networks impact ADCs? And it's more a case of actually ADCs will impact software-defined networks. But we can maybe come back to that if we get time at the end. But maybe best we take that one offline, as that's quite a long answer, and it's not really the direction that we're taking this webinar in, but very good that you brought that up. Another is about how do we help mobile devices. We'll be coming to that. And Another one is load balancing a layer 7 function. That's actually interesting. Load balancing, most people think of load balancing as a lower connection, but actually once you start to get into content switching, where you switch, where you're looking actually at the URL, the requests that are coming in to the URL that they're targeting, and send it to different servers based on maybe they're looking at history books, so you send it to the history books set of servers, or maybe they're looking at CDs, so you send it to the whatever type of CD. So there's a lot of higher level load balancing you can do as well, and so it actually works all the way through the stack. Let me see. If an application is hosted on AWS, etc., can you use an ADC? Yes, you can actually buy either by the hour or by the month or by a perpetual license. You can buy Netscaler on Amazon itself. So yes, Netscaler is used on Amazon. Okay, for the sake of time, I'm going to get back to the application now, but there are some really good questions, so do keep them coming, because if don't get a chance to answer within this webinar, we'll certainly try and follow up with you afterwards, but I will make sure we leave some time for some questions at the end. So on this next slide, this is just an example of some other things that will affect your web development and that can maybe help to make your applications run better. As I said, one is compression. As I said, I was surprised how much turning compression on the application delivery controller increased the performance of my website. And other things that you can do is you can put in rate limiting. So if you have a website that maybe someone's likely to come in and maybe scrape information out of, or do other things that could affect, that you don't mind them doing, but you don't want them to affect legitimate users, you can put on rate limiting. And there's some clever stuff you can do around that. So you can look that up later. I'm not going to go into these ones in detail. Also, make sure that you understand how the persistence layer works within the load balancing, because although you don't need to worry about it, it's good to know how it works and how to code that in to make better use. And then this next one, actually I will spend a little bit more time on because of some of the questions that came up around mobility. Now, one of the other things that application delivery controllers do is they do quite a lot, or Netscaler does in particular, because obviously within Citrix we have a big focus on mobility with our other products. And so there's a lot of features that are built into Netscaler that particularly help optimize mobile devices. And some of those things are things like multipath TCP, so that helps if you're switching connections. There's another interesting web protocol that's out there now called Speedy. And although an awful lot of devices support it, right now there aren't so many web applications that support it. And so, but it does make much more effective use of web browsers and makes the user experience on mobile devices work a lot faster. But what you can do with Netscaler is you can actually get Netscaler to talk Speedy to the end users, and rather than you having to rewrite and redesign your applications, it can then gateway back to HTTP, where it speaks back to the servers in standard HTTP. And the benefit of that is that the weak link and the part that it really needs to speed up on is obviously out to the mobile device. So we take care of that side, and we then gateway and convert it back to standard HTTP, the other side. Or we'll just load balance and enable you to be able to do all the clever things that we've talked about already in terms of rewrite and responder, etc. on Speedy. And then the last thing that I want to mention is the web application firewall. So, it's important to understand, particularly if you're doing e-commerce applications, etc., how secure your application is. And they're just some simple little things that people can do that can reveal a lot of detail out of the back end if you don't either have it coded correctly or have a web application firewall in. So, for example, instead of putting Melville as my name, I think if I put something like Melville space open quotes, I'm trying to remember, 1:1 close quotes, enter, it would give me a list back of all the Melvilles in the database with all their detail, which could include their credit card numbers. So it's things like that, that it's not that, you think your application is secure, but just by passing through information through your web application into the back end, and people know how to get through, it can bring information back. And there's ways of doing cross-site scripting as well, so that you could change, for example, the price on a TV. Maybe, the TV's out there for, $3,000, and, you don't have the right protections in, and it gets changed down to $35. And so there are things like that that go on all the time, and people think their applications are secure, but there are ways of getting through that, and what the Web Application Firewall does is it stops all that happening. So a network firewall for most web applications does pretty much nothing. So you do need these newer modern web application firewalls, and that's what Netscaler has in its application delivery controller. So on the next slide, so now I've told you a little bit about how the application delivery controller works in conjunction with web applications. It'd be interesting to hear back from you how, now you have this, where you were of this kind of functionality within the application delivery controller. So let's take that poll. So it should be on your screens now. If you just click one of those buttons, it will give us an idea. Okay, that's good. So it seems like a lot of you have got some good information then through that section. So next, I want to diverge a little bit and kind of go in a slightly different direction. And I just need to find my place in the presentation again. I'm not doing a good job of finding my way around. Here we go. So if we look at the application lifecycle, in the good, I call it the good old days. So I'm giving away perhaps my age a little bit as being a little bit older than 20. In the good old days, you used to run this thing called kind of waterfall development, and so things would go through a lot of set cycles, and you'd get to the point where you want to deploy, and maybe it's once a year, or maybe it takes a couple of years, and you're ready to deliver code. Now, when you're ready to deliver code, if you're delivering a web application, that's the time you really want to start testing. Well, actually, before you deliver the code at the test and validation. And at some point, you're going to need an application delivery controller. Now, as you see today, and I'm sure many of you are part of this, the way that particularly the smaller mobile web apps are developed nowadays and the rate that they come out, and it wouldn't support this design methodology. And so, people are moving to either an agile or a hybrid agile development environment. But the problem here is that if you're trying to get your application out so quickly, you need a lot more access to the application delivery controller. So how do you book time on an application delivery controller? I mean, can you get spare time on one, or, is there one floating around? And if there are multiple, if you're in an enterprise where there are multiple people delivering and producing web applications, then, who gets the spare ADC? And so then you end up in battles with your colleagues, or in situations, as we heard from a customer recently, where they took application delivery controllers are delivered in a high availability pair, so one's in standby, one's on primary. They took the standby one to test some applications, and when they put it back, they forgot to reset it into its right configuration. And so when their major application delivery controller failed, fortunately it wasn't a Netscaler, this one, failed, the secondary one didn't come up. And so there can be all sorts of problems with trying to get time on an ADC. Now, the good news is that with Netscaler, what's available in hardware within our MPX and SDX boxes is also available in software. So you can run the exact same code Obviously, it's not going to run so fast. It won't have the crypto chips for the SSL offload, but it was fully functioning on an MPX version. In fact, for smaller applications, people buy our Netscaler VPX version and just run it on a standard, Zen server or VM server, VMware server, etc. But the other nice thing that we do is if you do have a hardware version, you get the VPX Developer Edition for free as well, which means you can have as many of these as you like. They're a little bit restricted on the throughput, so you wouldn't want to use them in a full deployment scenario, but they can enable you to fully test your application. And so here's the sort of cycle that you'll want to go through if you are using, developing an application that needs access to an application delivery controller, and that's going to be shared at the end of the day. So the first thing you do is copy off the configuration. You then take that and do your development cycles and test against that configuration, making changes to that configuration. You can then export it back again, do some final production testing, and then move out to production. So having this VPX mode, an easy way of copying configs and moving forwards, makes it easier for you. So just for those of you that do test with ADCs, be interesting on this next poll to just hear how often you actually test your web applications with an application delivery controller. So if you're in the web application, that's your role, or you're involved in that way sometime, how often do you test web applications? So let's just give you a short while to answer that. Okay, that's interesting. So quite a number aren't today testing with ADCs. So that's hopefully that will change now. You realize that you can do that fairly easily. So now I want to move on to talk a little bit about now what happens next. And so what happens if my application hits the big time and I've now got lots of users? How can an application delivery controller help me then? Well, one of the things that I didn't mention earlier was that you may not be aware of is actually Netscaler sits in front of most of the world's largest .coms. And so obviously they're delivering a high degree of web content. And one of the things that we learned from working with these very large companies is, how they scale their applications and what sort of things that we could do and bring into Netscaler to help applications scale better within the enterprise in the same way as they have done with these very large internet companies. And so we released something back in 2012 called Triscale technology. And it's kind of very interesting and good stuff, and it can help you a lot as well. So the first one in Triscale technology is scale up, and that's just a simple way of delivering it in a package that means that it will grow elastically with you. So if you have a Netscaler and maybe it just has 5 gigabytes of throughput and your applications grow and you need more throughput, it's just a case of applying a license. And the other thing that we do, particularly for e-tailers, is we have what we call burst packs. So it has that elasticity. So if your websites are very active through certain periods, like the holiday period, then you can just pay to get additional performance through that period, and then it settles back down again to your standard license. But maybe that's not enough for you, and so you need other things as well. And it's very important for applications is being able to make sure that the the applications don't interfere with each other. And so on the scale in, we have this simplicity with one-to-many, which enables us to fully isolate the applications right down that are using the application delivery controller right down to the CPU and memory and crypto and network I/O. So there's guaranteed not to interfere with each other. And then the last one is expandability with clustering, which enables the application delivery controller to be expanded by adding more application delivery controllers in the cluster, but it still acts as one single unit or one single many-to-one unit. And so when we look at the way that application delivery controllers are used, because they are supporting critical applications, they're put in this mode, as I've already said, active-passive mode. But the problem there is 50% of the resources are unused. And so what our clustering allows is for you to deliver it in an active-active state where the actual, both of them are fully active. They actually act as one unit. And so rather than you having your spare capacity sitting there idle, you have your spare capacity sitting there active. So, it means that your applications are going to be significantly more responsive. You're going to have twice the resistance to denial of service attacks, etc. And then, as I said, you can fully scale if you want to add more power to your application delivery controller because your application's now got very large and you've got a lot of servers out there. Then you just add in more boxes, and it appears as just one box, one unit, so you don't have lots of test cycles. You don't have to pull old boxes out, put new boxes in. So it's a very efficient way of delivering more capacity. And then, as I said earlier, you don't want other applications crashing your application. You don't want your application crashing other applications. And the way we answer that is our application delivery controller can actually act as many application delivery controllers. And so it's one box, but to the outside world, in the same way as the cluster makes it all look as one box, this makes all those boxes look as many boxes. And the reason we do that is because when you get to looking at all the different applications that an enterprise might have, and now you start adding in, micro apps and web apps and other things that are coming along, to look at that, they have different business owners, they have different life cycles as well that go with that. They have different requirements in terms of throughput and in terms of other things such as functionality and security policies. Some could be public, some could be private, some could have financial transactions going across. And then things such as service levels and how often the application changes, etc. And maybe just the desire for new functionality. So maybe there's some new things in the web app firewall that your web application needs, but the old internal accounting application doesn't need it and they don't want it disturbed. And that leads to different maintenance windows as well as different versions being run out there. And so the old answer was to try and run everything through one box and try and tidy up maintenance windows, make everyone change everything all at the same time, make them all run the same version. But that leads to performance challenges. So, for example, you remember earlier I talked about turning on compression to speed up the user experience, but that uses more CPU cycles. So you could turn on compression to speed up your application, but that's still CPU cycles from other applications that then run more slowly because they don't need compression. And so there are a lot of issues. And so in the past, people would try and run an individual application delivery controller for their applications, but that's expensive. So people started to try and move towards more role-based delivery and divide up of the application, but then you get into these issues that we spoke about here. And so what we have instead is that we changed the box to have highly isolated multi-tenant solutions. And so we're the only one that currently that does this on the market, where we have a single box that divides up the CPU memory and I/O so that they are fully independent instances. And so if your application that's going through application set 2 starts to have problems or does something wrong, it doesn't affect anything in 1 and 3, and vice versa. So, when you're going out and launching an application, it's important to make sure that what's happening isn't impacting others. And by doing it this way as well, it enables people to reduce test cycles and get it out faster, because they only have to look as they're going through test at what the impact is on themselves. They don't have to worry about what the impact of their application is on other applications going through the same application delivery controller. So if your network team, or if you're not using Netscaler SDX at the moment and you have a lot of applications going through an application delivery controller, this is definitely one to take a look at. So when you go to launch, make sure you've got room to grow. That's what the scale up does. Make sure that you can significantly increase the performance without having to pull boxes down or change boxes. That's what the scale out does. And make sure you have the ability to launch without worrying about the effect on other applications or other applications' effect on you by using the scale in, and that's what SDX does. So what about after launch? Let's quickly go through this, and then we can sum up and take a few more questions. So after launch, basically you want to make sure that you can protect yourself from app attack and get around issues with OS patches. And so that's what our Web Application Firewall does. So we haven't time to go in detail about all its functions and how it helps protect applications today, but I would encourage you to take a look at that. One of the other things that we took as a key learning, those big .coms, as I was talking to you about earlier, they come in and meet with our engineering team once a year in a eBiz forum, and one of the things that they brought to us was getting better insight into what's going on their applications, and one of the obvious places to do that was the Netscaler, because that's where all the application flows through. So there's also, as part of Netscaler, this is it, you don't need to buy any extra license or anything, this comes with it, you get Insight Center. And so we use AppFlow that both can feed to third parties, and also we take that AppFlow records ourselves and send it off to Insight Center, which gives you deep insights into your web application. So you get end-user visibility. You can quickly see who are the users, what kind of agents are they using, Chrome, Firefox, IE, etc., what operating system they're on. And you can break things down, requests down by URL time, server time, and there's a lot of things that you can see in here that can help you understand what's happening in your application, and particularly if people are complaining of a slowness or something, you can see where exactly that's happening and whether it's something that you can do about it or it's an issue that you need to pass over to the network team. So definitely take a look at that if you're using a lot of web applications. So let's put a few takeaways up there, and then take a final polling question, and then go through some more of the questions that have come in. So if you haven't, you're not using application delivery controllers, take a look at BPX, download it, it's free. Or if you're somewhere in your company you're already using MPX or SDX, you can get that developer edition. There's a lot more information on these as well. You can check out our master classes. And particularly on things like rewrite responder, they'll go into a lot of detail there. And just make sure you always test your applications with a fully functioning ADC, not with partially functioning, and work with the team that manages and operates your ADC. As the Gartner report said, there are a lot of network teams that are buying application delivery controllers and then installing them as basic load balancers. And your application suffers if they're not making best use of all the functions within that ADC. So as a final question, just interested to see what you're going to do with this information. So this one you can put multiple responses to. But just quickly answer this question, and while you're answering the question, I'll take a quick look through the Q&A and pick a few questions for us to end with. Okay, so a lot of you said you're going to be reading up some more on ADCs, and quite a high number as well. Going to be looking into our master classes, so that's great. So as I say, there's a lot of information on our website if you want to know more. Been asked what's the typical price of an ADC like Netscaler. Anything, I can only tell you list prices. You'd obviously have to work with your resellers to get full prices. And but if you're buying a perpetual license, this is ignoring the rentals and stuff you can do on places like Amazon and IBM's SoftLayer, etc. It starts from a full list price of anything from $2,000 upwards. So that's answering that one. Let's see, what else do we have here? Can you log HTTP? Are the sizes of HTTP body requests, etc., logged? There's an awful lot of logging that does go on. I don't know whether that comes in standard logging or whether that's something you'd have to turn on specifically, but yes, there's extensive logging. Another one asking if we can explain a little bit more on compression. So I want to make sure we finish before top of hour, so maybe we'll make this one the last one that we'll answer, and then we'll take any of the other questions offline. But compression, so most browsers support compression, but typically that is not something that you will turn on a web server. And the reason is that it's very processor intensive. And so if you turn on support for compressed HTTP on a web server, it affects the overall performance of the web application. And compression is best used when people have slower links or longer links or mobile devices, etc. And so what happens in the application delivery controller is it has the way the code and the hardware is developed is for specific purposes, and so it's able to do compression significantly more efficiently and effectively than a server would be, and so you're able to bring compression into the equation by turning on compression either in a smart way for certain situations or just generically across for all end users. So as I said, compression, bit like Speedy, it's supported in the browser itself. And so by turning that on, you're just going to give a better experience. It's going to reduce the amount of data that has to travel through the network, and thus it makes the whole experience respond quite a bit better. So with that, I'm one of those people that always like to end a little bit earlier, so let me hand it back to Yasmina.
Ram, thank you so much for presenting such a fascinating and informative webcast for us all today. We would also like to say a very big thank you to Citrix for sponsoring today's webcast and let you all know that Netscaler, the market-leading application delivery controller from Citrix, is designed to speed up development, testing, deployment, and maintenance of web applications. This webinar has given an overview of what an ADC is and how the choice of ADC can affect the running and development of web applications. In the age of mobility and the trend toward agile application development, working with the right ADC can make or break an application. Thank you again, Citrix. Folks that attended our event today, we thank you so much for spending your time with us, and we hope you have enjoyed and benefited from today's webcast. This will conclude today's event. Thank you all so much. Goodbye.